Good evening and welcome to the Cloud Frontiers podcast. Myself, Tom, I've got my man Juan on the call. We're going to discuss some of the highlights of cloud computing infrastructure and how this might work for real life scenarios, how you might utilize the latest in tech and trends. So my name is Tom. I've been a systems designer, systems architect for the last decade. I currently work as a contractor at NASA JPL, run a consultancy called Concept to Cloud, where we take concepts and help spin them up in a cloud environment. So that's sort of what I do. Juan, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Juan. I've been following Tom around in the tech world for the last few years now. Mostly helping them build prototypes and some web scraping I got into recently. And just a other little bunch of here and there in the tech world.
Thank you very much. So moving on, we're going to start with the news. We're going to round up some of the latest hot topics. And I saw yesterday, Google have launched a little platform, a little application called Local LLM, which allows you to spin up quantized miniature LLM models in a Google Cloud environment on one of their workstations. The nice thing is that you don't have to have um, GPUs attached, so the platform works in a nice lightweight environment, keeping costs down, ensuring a sort of better market value, and also enhancing that data security and the portability. I think that's a cool little project, and if other platforms can come up with a way of running low cost LLMs in a workstation environment for developers, that's a cool little project.
A little bit more news on AI stuff. Apparently, Amazon's cloud boss is linking this AI hype to the .com bubble. So apparently, we got some people that aren't so bullish about it right now. But he apparently said that this is just overhyped stuff that eventually it will collapse like the bubble. Which I mean, it's a bit understandable, seeing as the whole hype is pretty much everywhere. Then everybody's only talking about it, and let's be honest, it's like after using it these last few months or year, 2 years, that has been kind of mainstream. It got its flaws and it got its ups at the same time, but I don't see it going anywhere. So at the same time, maybe not such of a bubble, but definitely a lot of hype right now. Still.
There's definitely a lot of hype. I agree. I mean, I don't think the LLMs are going to go anywhere, but the hype is certainly up there. I mean, if you haven't got a product with some sort of AI leverage that they're attempting on the side of it, just bolt that stuff on. Marketing teams are all over it, and so it does feel a bit like it, doesn't it? Where everyone is trying to do everything with AI. Eventually, that will calm down, and we'll end up in a nice place where these models do, what they're supposed to do, rather than try and crowbar it onto everything. But at the moment, the hype really is there. The other thing that I saw, which is moving on from LLMs, is I'm trying not to just be an LLM channel. There's plenty of places that do just that. I saw AWS now support the streaming of data into Snowflake, which is a Databricks competitor out there, allowing you to stick a fire hose into Snowflake and get that data streaming in, which I think streaming data is going to be a sort of big hot topic over the next couple of years, where instead of going from batch processing, everything becomes about streaming real-time access to data. And so if you can get that stuff into a platform like Snowflake quickly and easily with a few clicks or a bit of Terraform code, that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, going back to AI stuff again for a little bit. Apparently, Microsoft is making Azure Open AI services available on government cloud services. So, I mean, there's still a lot of elements to go around. Everyone needs one, and apparently, the government needs one too. So that's the
I mean,
difference.
but we talk about local LLM and data security. Obviously, with a platform like OpenAI, government organizations have an awful lot of knowledge and they would like to be able to leverage it. But they want to be able to do it in an environment that adheres to, government protocols and data security, platform security, be able to run stuff in Amazon's Govcloud or using the FedRAMP service for federal procurement and what have you. It's key. I mean, Microsoft aren't stupid. They know that this stuff has got to run in secure environments if
Correct.
the military or NASA or whatever is going to make use of it, and that's understandable. So,
Definitely.
it's a smart move, and I'm not surprised that it's happening.
Yeah, no, definitely gotta leverage what you got, right?
Absolutely.
But speaking of leveraging stuff in Snowflake, so is Snowflake an open source software or not?
So Snowflake leverages aspects of open source software. The platform itself is not, but there's an awful lot of platforms these days that are starting to use more open table formats. All of them use like Parquet under the hood, which is open source table storage format. The tweaks and differences are in the metadata storage layer and how all these different formats are being saved. And so you've got Delta, you've got Iceberg, you've got Hoodie, which are the main three sort of table storage formats. Delta is technically open source, but it's all maintained by Databricks. And so, you're sort of beholden to what they want to do. Whereas Iceberg and Hoodie are both Apache Software Foundation projects. And that means that there's a conglomerate of businesses trying to steward those projects, which just means that if you want to leverage something, if you're a Snowflake type organization and you want to add some value to your customers, leveraging something that is guaranteed to be open source in the future and can be run in a sort of more democratized environment is why you see all these Iceberg vendors popping up where they're sticking that into their platform. It's fair enough.
So you've been working on some recent open source projects lately, haven't you? That got to do with NASA, right? Can you give us a little bit background on that?
Yeah. So part of what NASA's been doing over the last few years is making an effort to open source what they can, which will allow for more scientists, different organizations to leverage those products in an open and collaborative environment, which is obviously a good thing. So I've been working on a platform called Pixlise, which is an open source spectrometry tool that uses data that's come down from NASA Perseverance, Mars 2020, using the Pixel instrument on there. Basically, it scans rocks. It attacks rocks with laser beams and detects the chemical makeup of those rocks. We then process that data and then show it to the scientists so they can understand what the rock compound is made up of, how much iron's in there, whatever elements are in there. So it's cool. It's cool. It's all open source. It's all on GitHub.
I mean, laser beams and data science. Like, what can it get cooler than that? Man? So how? Okay, so I got another question for you. How does one come up with the platform design for that? Like, how did the like making process go about like actually having to visualize this stuff on a UI or something?
Yeah, it's changed a lot over the years. I mean, certainly something that we had, which was like gold dust on this project, was the UX designer. So someone that really understood how the scientists were going to interact with the platform, both from a platform design perspective, but also just sitting down with the end users, which is something that's quite often forgotten. You look at Google and sometimes you wonder where they invested in their UX, but the reality of the situation was that when we started the project, there was some code that was based like a website that's basically sat in an S3 bucket with some Python that wrapped around it. And we had to come up with a way to deploy that code in a more scalable environment, portable environment, because it may not always be in AWS. So we did go through a few iterations where we had some stuff that was built into AWS, some stuff that was in Kubernetes. But it was always hard to design that platform because as a developer, you never necessarily knew where the error occurred if there's been a problem with the platform. So we sort of ended up going all in on Kubernetes in the end, which uh, is not necessarily an advisable thing to do, but for the project, it made sense at the time. And that gives us portability. Everything's in one place. Everything's sat in a container somewhere. So it did make the workflow a little easier. So yeah, we went through a number of iterations on that design, and ended up in Kubernetes world.
You said Kubernetes, so, like, I can imagine it wasn't too much of a big team. Looking hindsight now, would you have still used Kubernetes, or would you guys have used a different technology if possible or available at that time?
Um, Depends what you want to do. So, like from a Kubernetes perspective, if you want to create something that's portable, something that you can deploy into a bunch of different environments, run it on prem, run it on a on a server under your desk or in AWS or Azure or wherever, then Kubernetes is great because it does give you that portability. What it comes with though is an awful lot of complexity because you need all these Docker containers. You need to
Right.
understand how pods are provisioned, how all this stuff is spun up. So, if I was doing it again with a small team, if I was just deploying something that had to stay in AWS, I would literally just design for AWS. There's an awful lot of serverless tools out there that would do job data processing stuff inside of AWS that would support what we're trying to do instead of having to write that stuff from scratch because we're running it inside of a pod. So yeah, if I was doing it for another project and it was just for a specific cloud, I would design for that cloud.
You said, you guys had brought on a UX guy on the team, and, so we do a lot of prototypes, and usually we don't get the luxury of, I guess, getting that big where we can actually onboard a UX guy. So we're kind of just like scrambling around, getting together, sticking together UI. How do you deal with with that like pre UX guy? Basically, I guess I'm asking, would you start with the UX guy off the top nowadays, or would you still kind of wait for the project to get big enough? And if you do use a UX guy, how do you how do you implement the UI? Would you use framework, or would you use like TypeScript, JavaScript? What exactly would be the process of decision making on using that or bringing that together?
So I think a lot of businesses see a UX engineer as like a luxury that they not necessarily can afford, which is a shame because what I see when it comes to UX design is an engineer who understands deeply the interaction between a human and the interface. And what that obviously allows is for you to build a far more tuned application straight off the bat rather than like designing a platform that is stuck together just to prototype stuff out, but you design that platform and then offer it up to people and people don't know how to interact with it. Instead, what you do is you go with some wireframes that the guy or girl has designed in Figma or whatever, deploy it, show that stuff to users, get some feedback, and then go and build it. And that means that when that first iteration of the prototype is then shown to people, at least it's something like what they saw in the wireframes and mockups. And so I would, 100% uh, bat for a UX person to be on the team. I mean, I probably won't win all that often, but I think it's a valuable resource that they don't have to be a full-time person. They don't have to stick around for that long. They can just come and go, but it's a useful person to have on the team. And so I would always advocate for one. In terms of actually building a platform, um, if you're a bit like us and we're sort of dabbling in full stack stuff, we're building cloud infrastructure, we're building APIs, we're building UIs and stuff, I would yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go for a like React type framework just because of the sheer complexity of that stuff. What you end up with is code soup and it goes wrong fast. Um, so I would well, I mean, I've been using Svelte on another project, and for someone who's not a massive UI guy, I think Svelte's quite a nice sort of middle ground where you get reactive stuff, but you don't have all the
Right.
complexity of all the hooks and stuff that you get with React. But I have been using TypeScript with that Svelte, so it forces me to write, code that is at least half decent in terms of what the structure looks like, how it's formatted, how I relate to objects and stuff, which JavaScript just doesn't enforce. And so it's it TypeScript for me, whilst there's complexity because you've got to compile it and it all gets transpiled and stuff. Um, it does force the platform to forces the developer to write more succinct and useful code.
So where can we find all these open source projects that you're working on? Where can we find you at? Where how can we contribute?
There are a number of places that you can find this stuff. The basic distribution method is GitHub. For Pixlise, which I work on, you can go to github.com/Pixlise, and all the code is there for anyone that's interested in mass spectrometry, X-ray spectrometry, or just what we do when it comes to nerding out at NASA. There is also github.com/NASA and github.com/NASA JPL, where there's various different open source projects that are stuck up there. Some are maintained, some are not. But it's nice. It's nice to have all that stuff, deployed into the open so that people can join in or at least see what we're up to. Because at the end of the day, it's taxpayer funded.
Yeah. We should have all the links somewhere down here
Links
for
to everything will be in the description. Yeah, no, that's true.
y- no, that is great. And you know what? I totally agree. I mean, if we're funding this stuff, I mean, we should be able to use it as well. So I definitely encourage everybody to get involved, get in touch if you're got any questions or whatever. But yeah, no, from what I've seen, I mean, since I've been contributing to open source for like the last few years now, it's always great. I mean, there's always somebody that wants to help. If you really look for it and you try to contribute, someone's gonna welcome you with open arms. You just
It's a
gotta
great
go
way of
and
getting experience, isn't it? It's a great way of getting started in software development, in not just from like a learning the ropes perspective, but from growing your network, getting to know people, getting to know other people in other businesses, so that when you want to make that next step to your next job in your career path, whatever, there's people that you can either go and ask for jobs or ask for advice when it comes to resumes or CVs or, what you've got
right.
to discuss in an interview and stuff. It just helps, doesn't it? It's generally a friendly bunch of people.
Yeah, but you know what? And you said a mouthful there. In tech, you can never stop networking. It's a nonstop game. I mean, like if you the second you stop, you're gonna get left behind. So yeah, that's definitely a way to expand your network. Definitely a way to get some experience in, like you said, because you'll most likely be held to like high standards, and so you'd get a little bit taste of what you'd expect from work as well. So I totally agree. And again, a lot of them guys are just, or a lot of them folks in general are just really good people, open arms, and everybody needs help. So if you're willing to help, they're most likely willing to take it. And
Yeah.
especially since
I mean, we all start somewhere, don't we? I mean,
right,
I got involved in open source software development because it was either that or just sit around and print Excel spreadsheets all day. And so, there's reason you don't have to be. People are like, oh, well, you have to be a developer to get into open source software. Absolutely, you don't. There's
yeah.
loads of stuff you can do. You can do documentation, evangelism. People will help you learn to code if you want to fix simple bugs and stuff. And so, it's a great way if you work in a non software development industry and you want to break into that as a career progression or whatever, then, go and help out. Just spend a few hours every now and again just supporting an open source project because they'll thank you for it.
Oh yeah, and don't even mention documentation. If you're a documentation person and people would love to get you onto their project because there's
Yeah.
never enough documentation, folks. I promise you, there isn't. Because
Yeah. No,
I'm not gonna
absolutely.
lie,
Same
I
thought.
am horrible with it. I am very bad with
Well, I
it.
mean, it's the problem, isn't it? Like, if you're an open source developer, you're probably doing it in your spare time. Documentation comes last because you want to write the code and make sure that people who are
Correct.
asking for stuff are happy. And,
Yeah, that's so true. So, any last thoughts, Tom?
Um, no. No, I mean, I've been lucky to work on the projects I have, and they're just a great way to get involved in software development and get to know people. So, I've really enjoyed like working for NASA on open source stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we do with concept to cloud. Getting businesses, getting ideas off the ground, which is just exciting, like world to be in. You've got all these people who are infused about projects, be it NASA, be it a startup, be it someone that's just got a bunch of VC funding. They want to get that stuff deployed. And so, this is why as a business, we're here. It's to help those people get their stuff from the drawing board into some environment where they can have people test it, an MVP, and then onto production because it's just cool, isn't it? There's so much software that's
Right.
out there to be written, and we're the guys that can help get that stuff out in front into the public.
Yeah,
quickly,
no,
effectively, securely, and cheaply. So,
yeah, and that's the thing. It can be really intimidating from somebody who got like limited cash to be like, "Oh, okay, man, I really only got one shot to do it. How do I do it?" You know, and because there's no real wrong way, it makes it even harder because now you got a million paths compared to one you think is supposed to be right. So, yeah, just give us a call and we'll definitely help you walk down that path. I mean, we've done it a few times already. It's been a great trip. It's been great. Really.
yep. No, I think it's cool. So there we go. We finally, hopefully, got to the end of the first podcast. We will edit it down, get this thing shipped. I hope you all enjoy it. Obviously, the format is new, a bit of news, a bit of discussion about what we're doing or something cool. If there's anything specific that you guys want to see in the podcast, do let us know in the comments or on social media. Because we're here to make your lives hopefully a bit entertaining, but also just pique that interest and help drive the cloud frontier forward. So, thank you very much for Juan for joining in on this first podcast. Thank you
Thank you.
very much to the audience who have tuned in. We'll be back very soon. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.
Yes.